Hi, I'm Chris Grimm, founder, coach, principal consultant of ARIA Consulting. For 24 years, we've been serving leaders and their teams around the world. This podcast, which I wanted to call The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, but is called And Then I, is nothing scripted, nothing fancy. I promise that we'll be talking about successes and failures. It's the gold, I call it, that you find only in real stories with real leaders in real time. With that, I invite you to sit back, soak up the wisdom here of these everyday superheroes. Enjoy. Hi, everybody, and welcome to this episode of And Then I. I'm Chris Grimm from ARIA Consulting, and today I want to jump right in because I'm with a true superhuman, an experienced leader, an experienced CHRO, an author of the leadership papers, and soon to come, we'll talk about maybe if it's not top secret, Russell Davis. And I want to give a little frame, and then I'm going to hand it to Russell to tell you a little bit more about himself. But I feel like I'm honored that you're here with me, Russell, because you are an expert in a way that maybe people don't understand, because I feel like you're a real life practitioner, right? Every day, in the time I've known you, which I want to talk about in a few minutes, because I actually don't even remember the year. But I feel like you do every day what some people talk about, which is, I feel like, for managers, for executives, all levels of leaders, you're in the trenches, attempting to help them in the moment be effective in ways that a consultant like myself, I can't do that, right? Like, I'm in and out. So as I was preparing for this, I was thinking, oh my gosh, like, you actually are the person who's the leader whisperer. And so I know there's a lot of gold, and I want to jump in there with you. And as I hand the baton to you, do you remember the year that we got into each other's orbit?
I think it was 2005.
Wow.
Yeah, that's so I laugh because I was working with a colleague of ours, Michelle Calderigi, and others that you know, and they literally said the words, "We need to bring in." Back then, what they said was, "We need to bring in the big guns," and that was Christine, that was you. And
wow. In
yeah,
2005.
it was way back then, because they literally described your presence. They describe your presence, your professionalism, and how you are able to kind of cut to the heart of the needs of the organization and the individuals who actually called you in. And you were able to do, I remember, without going into too much detail, I remember the meeting with the CEO at the time, and you made a phenomenal assessment in a very short time and came to the realization that sometimes folks aren't interested in what they say they're interested in. And you were accurate, and you were graceful, and you moved out of there very gracefully, but you also gave us some tools to help the organization kind of decide how it wanted to move forward. So that was very, very helpful. So I'm not sure if I'm a good whisperer, but you were excellent at it. So thank you.
Oh, that's really nice. Well, everybody, that's maybe why almost 20 years later, here we are. Well, I'm glad to hear that. That was really kind of you. And before we jump in, do you want to give a little bit more detail around, I know you just made a switch, so your big announcement of your new CHRO role here in Los Angeles. So go ahead, why don't you give some details of that?
So thank you for that. I'm currently the Chief People Officer for a company called Revolution Entertainment Services. And this is kind of going back into the world of for-profit entertainment, payroll, software, and kind of people structure. And the beauty of this organization is the founders were people that I knew when I worked in entertainment payroll, but 20 years ago, and it was hilarious. One of them was what used to be called the paymaster, he was a payroll coordinator who started moving up through the ranks. Another individual, Suki Pabla, he started off at like the check desk delivering boxes.
Love that.
And both of these individuals were just moved up through the ranks and said things like, someday I'm going to have my own company. And when I do, not if I do, someday I'm going to have my own company. And when I do, I'm going to populate it with people who we want to literally change the world. So they came up with the name Revolution. Um, I was in a board meeting yesterday, and they kind of walked through the history when they thought about the idea in 2017, when they put some things into practice, when they had one product, and then how they've grown in a very short while, how they moved away from the first set of seed money, bought their company back.
Oh,
And then in 2020, January 2020, and now they have grown from 3 to over 100 lives now. And we're looking at our future and how we're going to grow. So I'm really excited to be with them.
yeah, I love when someone's dream comes true. Right? That's
Yeah.
kind of awesome. And in some ways, so as you were just saying it, I'm like, yeah, that's kind of why I started this podcast, right? Like, I really want to help people aspire to the next level, whatever that means, get what they need to do that. So yeah, that's a lovely real life version of the story, right? I'm back there as a coordinator or young entry level person, and now I have the company that I wished I would have worked for. I'm making it.
That is true. And you know, and I think sometimes there is an idea with entrepreneurs and also something with how I've experienced, like long-term or long-time CEOs, where they have an idea about what success looks like. And for many of them, they start with like the success of the company, financial success. And then sometimes it can kind of move into this idea of what's the company that I want. They started off with what's the type of company that we want to be and how do we get there, which and they want to stay there and be successful financially and other things. So
it seems like it would be more common, but I think that it's not, right? It's exactly what you were saying. In most situations, people start companies or historically, maybe that's changing. Maybe that's changing. I don't know. The values of new leaders seem to be very different than values of leaders of the past. So maybe we'll see more of this, right? People starting from a different place and building into the money instead of starting there.
Right. It is. I think it's a very different mindset. So, and I hope that is a new trend. And once again, they can still be successable. They just need to kind of define what that means for them in the organization. So I hope that trend continues.
I hope so too. You know, a theme that keeps coming up when we talk, and you mentioned it earlier, is because I live with it, you live with it, right? Leaders saying they want something, and then you know, whether it's change and transformation, whether it's DE&I, or you know, or just I want my leaders to behave differently, and then they start to get what they asked for, and maybe they don't want that. Let's just talk a little bit about that, because I think a lot of people who might be listening and watching this video now and in the future, they're going to come up against this, right? Like, it's a thing. And maybe we can talk a little bit, since you deal with it now at the executive level. So yeah, let's talk a little bit about that whole, they say they want something and then maybe they don't want it.
Right. You know, I think that's a great intro, because for unfortunately, for many of the experiences that I've had as a consultant and as a, let's call it a regular full-time C-suite staff member, when I work with companies, or when I work with CEOs, or when I'm in a company, I always ask the question, what do you want to be? Where do you see yourself? What do you want to do? How do you want your company represented? What's the vision? What are your goals? Because I'm someone who believes that values of the organization or the individual are always demonstrated by behaviors. So when an organization, when a CEO says, here's who I want to be, here's who I want us to be seen, here's how I want us to be represented in the world, I'm like, okay. And there's lots of ways we can get there. What do you want to do personally to demonstrate that you actually mean that? And so I asked that question, and I get a lot of conversation with folks say, well, I used to get, I'm willing to do whatever it takes. And I said, well, that's a big statement. Okay. So some folks say I'm willing to do whatever. Yeah, it's so I'm willing to do whatever it takes. Or well, what do you think we need to do? And so I said, well, let's really do kind of an assessment of where you are, of where the organization is, where what we do analysis, and we just do kind of a review, personal, professional. And I typically talk with all of the staff members in the company, everybody in the company, whatever level they are. And so we get this idea of what is the reality of where I work versus this idea of what's said. The gap between saying and doing can sometimes be pretty significant. So what we look at is, how do we build a bridge to get those two things connected? And then once we find all that information, we have the conversation with the leadership, the CEO and others, and we say, hey, here's what people are saying. Here's what you've said. Here's ways that we can try to get to that. And here's what it's going to take. Typically, it is around behaviors of the key leadership.
Right.
And I've had folks say to me directly, I'm really not willing to do that. I'm not willing to change what I do. And they have lots of reasons. I've been a successful businessman. Therefore, and I said, well, when you say success, what do you mean? Why? I've had this company, I grew it from nothing, and now we make a lot of money. So if the people don't want to be here, then they should leave. I'm like, okay. That's a very interesting perspective, because they didn't say that they didn't want to be here. What they said was, in many respects, how you treat folks, how you engage with the company, some of the things that you do, the behaviors you engage in. If they were different, they would really enjoy all aspects of the work environment. Mm-hmm. And I've had CEOs say to me very directly, well, we need to stop listening to those folks, because they're just complaining, right? What else did you hear? Can you tell me some of the good things? There's good things too, but but more often I've had folks say, well, look, I'm going to be who I am, and I'm going to do what I've done because I've been successful at it. That group of folks, the mid-level or others, have them do whatever they need to do to be successful from that level down. And I'm like, well, that's an interesting way to look at it. Will you support them doing what they need to do? And sometimes the answer is, well, that depends. How is it going to impact me? How is it going to see? It's very typically not how is it going to impact the bottom line. It's how it's going to impact the behaviors that I'm used to doing every day. I have folks who say, I don't talk to people in elevators because I don't want to get into conversations with my staff members and have silly conversations. And I'm like, do you talk with them at all? No, I let their managers talk with them. I've worked with CEOs who are very personable. But there's pieces that they kind of miss with when you say something like, my door is always open, and folks come to that door and they ask you questions and talk about things. You say, why are they coming to see me? That I don't want to have those conversations. They said, well, you open the door and they walk through. So once again, it's all about those behaviors that one is really interested in demonstrating. It's a value of mine to demonstrate that I care, right? And I can do that in many different ways. Now, one can also say, I'm very interested in demonstrating my professional prowess. So I'm very interested in demonstrating that I am at a level, and I want to make sure people understand what respect means for me, or that they can only really come to see me on the second Tuesday of every month. And I say, well, that would actually be better for you to say. Just be honest about your availability, be honest about your proposition, be honest about your interest and engagement, and then people have an understanding of that. But I have to,
Don't make it.
Right. I have to give we at some places that I work, I've had staff members say, I wish I could be more involved. And so we started this activity called If I Ran the Company. And it's it was kind of and we would take managers, supervisors, and others who were connected with the organization, who were demonstrating that they really wanted to kind of do more. And we would have this exercise where we would say, I know folks have said, if I ran a company, I would do X. There's a lot of pieces of that you may not have fully flushed out. So what would you like to do if this was yours? And so people come up with great ideas. They're like, well, I would invest in international markets, or I would change. Folks are very specific. Here's what I would do if for the payroll department or the accounting department. And so part of the exercise was, you need to think about what you would want to do would impact other staff members, who needs to be involved in the success of that idea, what the costs would be, and what resources you would need, whether it's staffing or office space or whatever. Put together a proposal. And so these teams would do that.
Yeah, that's really cool.
It's really fantastic. And I was working with a company, the one that you where we met, and we did this exercise. And the day before the 6 teams were supposed to present at a leadership meeting, the owner said, I don't want to do it. He literally called me in New Mexico and said, I don't want to do it. And I said, why? And he said, well, the ideas might be silly. And I said, but you haven't even heard them yet. And he said, I do not want to have to sit in front of a room full of people who bring me stupid ideas about where they think the company could grow, and then shoot those ideas down one by one. That's a waste of my time. And so I remember pausing and saying, okay, the ideas might not be stupid, because you didn't hire stupid people. These are individuals who are running your departments and who have ideas about how they could grow the company. Not about how they could get a raise, how they could grow the company so that everyone benefits. And he just said, cancel it. So
Cancel it?
Yeah. Yeah. It was an off-site retreat at a golf club for 100 staff members. And he said, it's done. I remember sending the email and calling folks. And they had their PowerPoint presentations. They had invested so much in it. And right. And I remember the follow-up conversation a couple of days later with the owner. And I said, you know, this you've done some damage to your key leadership staff. Now you're going to have to spend some time rebuilding trust. And he said, no, they'll get over it. You know, they're getting the paycheck.
It's so common, you know, as you were talking, I was thinking about all the times. I've been at this 25 years. So all the times I've heard or been a part of this play out, this story that you're saying, like, so for everybody listening or watching, if you're sitting there aghast, like, oh, I can't believe that. Like, I think it actually happens more often than people want to imagine. And I want to throw a word in here. I might have said it earlier, but it's a little bit like Pulp Fiction, right? Like you and I are often the same movie, but different vantage points. And as an outsider who, you know, the pros and cons, the good and the bad about my world is that I come and go, right? You're there all the time. God love you. I get to come in and often am paid to do something specific. Mm-hmm. With a scope that has a beginning and an end. And so it's not uncommon that we help people like yourself and internal leaders, you know, whether it's a high potential program or to do exactly what you're talking about in some way, pull people into the business, engage leaders through the ranks, bring ideas, execute on new initiatives, manage change. And so, you know, for everybody, this is a good learning, because I want to talk about why this happens outside of what some people might be thinking, well, the boss is a jerk. Because it's not always that, right? Like, it's not always that the boss is short-sighted, or there's a whole bunch of ways that you might assume, like, how could they be that person? How could somebody do that? And I've been in, even recently, some situations with leaders where they also had a pause after they had asked for something. And I think you and I might have been talking about it. We had something where the leaders had asked us to integrate a DE&I initiative into their strategic planning with really good intentions, by the way, to not have it be a separate program, to integrate for everybody. If you don't know, diversity, inclusion, and equity, that's DE&I. People put them in different order depending on who's leading. But oftentimes it is similar in nature. We have new people, we're going to include more people, we're going to expand, we want more diverse perspectives, etc. Anyway, the bottom line of my story is that as we started to do that, and we had to bring in an expert because that's not where we play usually. So it took another person joining us to do that. The executives got scared. So their intention was right. In the beginning, they were saying and doing and wanting things. And then as it started, it got uncomfortable in ways that I don't know that any of us could have predicted. Maybe we could have, but no one did. And so the execs immediately were like, no, shut that off. Like, what are we doing? And, you know, to your point, and it's a good leadership lesson, everybody, because how that is handled matters. And I'm going to throw one other thing at you, Russell, that I've said to you, right? I often look at that as like a balance at the top of the house, but also leaders through the ranks. Like, you know, what is the intention of leaning into this thing, whatever it is? Whether it's a new ERP system or it's diversity and inclusion or it's digital transformation, I don't really care what the effort is. In the beginning, we have intentions, but I don't know that even with the best change management efforts, we really get into our leaders' heads enough around what are they going to tolerate?
Yeah.
Because it's always harder than we think. And like I said, the luxury for me is I get to leave. And then Russell takes the ball and I wave goodbye.
Yeah. Chris, I have to say, you made a lot of good points there. And this idea of execution is really key. Follow through, completion of the task, the agenda, the ideals, the values, the mission, all those things are really difficult because they are actions that happen every day to support that. And I truly believe that every employee in the company, every employee in the organization should recognize, should understand, and should be able to articulate what they're doing to further the mission or the goals. Whatever your job is, whether you're the CEO or whether you're in the mailroom, you know, somebody should be able to say, well, here's what my part is all about. Here's how I factor into that, because I want them to feel and be valuable, recognize that they are a part of the organization, regardless of what they do, whatever their role is, they are a part. There's a piece of that where I would say to the CEO and others, every employee in the organization has power, okay? Because anyone who interacts with clients or prospects or anyone has the ability to undermine your organization. They also have the ability to be the face of it in a way that is transformative or which is excellent or brings people in. So when you talk about power, it's not always about the position that someone has. It's about access to others, right? And so you talk about the environments where people are in, which you say, well, this is toxic. Toxic environments are always about the people. And so how do you address that issue of toxicity at any level? When sometimes what folks only look at is, well, but they produce. They produce really well, or they create really well. And so I have this idea that the outcome is important, but the process of getting there is just as important. The process is just as important as completing that task or the outcome. And I think some folks forget that because they only look at where they want to be. They don't think about all the work, the circuitous work, the day-to-day work. And this is kind of what you talk about when you come in, you literally provide tools, motivation, help folks with confidence, and give them structure so that they can actually plan out what they want to do and then move forward with it. And you do a very good job of it. And then what the staffs are left with is, hey, we have to execute kind of on a daily basis so that we can get to this piece. So what do I need? How do I communicate effectively? How do I understand more about what role I have? How do I learn my job better? Those are all the things that I think you help folks understand. Here's what you need to do from the top to the bottom. And then we walk through it in our daily lives. And I have to say, you cannot underestimate the impact of proper motivation. And motivation isn't you from the outside telling folks what motivates, and you literally connect with what motivates them to do their work. And so when as you have done in numerous companies and with numerous people, you recognize what is important to them so that they can move through that slog every day and not get stuck with in the disappointments or the slow progress. You help folks move through that. It is super critical and important. So not that you're underestimating what you do, I just wanted to make sure that you recognize that, and the folks who are listening recognize the importance of what you do.
You know, it's interesting because I don't always look at it from that perspective. Oftentimes I see our role, as, well, this about my style, but saying the things that I don't think anybody else is going to say. Right. Because, it just is, right? Like these things
Right.
exist, and the people who that's their day job,
Mhm.
they're paying your mortgage. They're not paying my mortgage.
Right.
So I often believe that a role that third party consultants, sometimes contractors, depending on how long they're going to be there, part of the responsibility is I can put myself at risk in a way that other people won't. And the reason that's important, like you're saying, is that unless you ground your change initiative in reality, the chances of it actually being executed in the way that you've envisioned is not guaranteed. Sometimes the percentage of, our ability to actually predictably bet on that continues to decrease over time. And, I was going to ask you about something. I don't know how much you want to give away about your new book, and I want to be protective of that. But something that we talked about in our prep call is really compelling to me. I wrote it down like in big letters. And it has to do with what we're talking about. It's the patience part.
Right. Right.
Never have I ever, first of all, never, I was reflecting on this yesterday. In none of these podcasts, and I've been doing a lot since 2020, no one's talked about patience, Russell. No one. So you've got something here. So if there's already a lot of stuff out there, I've missed it, but I do think we should talk about it because what you were saying is important. It is a slog. Like
it's a slog, yeah.
Right? Like day to day, so people out there who have a day job and you're wondering like, oh my gosh, is this change ever going to end? Is it ever going to be what we thought it was going to be? Is this system ever going to work? Is this blah, blah, ... right? Yeah, let's talk about this because patience, why don't we talk about that more?
Yeah. Yeah. I appreciate you saying that. And the book that should be coming out in April, it's called The Power and Promise of Benevolent, Compassionate Leadership. Turning the spark of leadership into a flame. It's a long title, but I have some ideas around leadership that are always demonstrated once again by behaviors. There's feelings and there's thoughts and there's actions, but one of what I call kind of one of the key concepts in benevolent, compassionate leadership is understanding self, understanding others, understanding the objectives, practice, and patience. And when I thought about it, the idea of patience from kind of a servant leadership model is the definition of patience and servant leadership is showing self-control. You know, that's kind of like the short answer. But my idea around it is so much more. Patience is, some folks believe that patience is a process of waiting. It's just like how folks sometimes confuse a wish with hope. A wish, you don't have to do anything. You just have to wish it. I wish I had $1 million. You don't have to do anything. My idea around hope is all about action. You know, I hope this happens. Therefore, I'm going to engage in the behaviors, the process, the learning, whatever it might be, so I can make that happen. But what I have to recognize is that my skill level, my understanding, my experience level happens over time. That's where I need to be patient, because if I'm trying to rush into something, an idea, learning the guitar, you know, learning anything, if my expectation is that I will not just be successful, but I will understand it and learn it immediately, that's unrealistic. And so what we have to have is, and in the book, there's a whole section that kind of gives some understanding around this idea of patience through looking at like Nelson Mandela. And he was imprisoned for so many years. I'm like 27. I mean, he's just years, and his conditions were pretty horrible. And they talked about him developing this patience where he went into self. And this idea of understanding self is a process of patience, because you have the opportunity to gain incredible experiences by sitting and I want to be clear. I have no expectation that folks are imprisoned and that's the way that they learn patience. But I learned to sit with myself and understand who I am, so that I can become the person that I want to be. So understanding self and patience are inextricably combined. And I started, I didn't realize this, but I started thinking about this when I was a Peace Corps volunteer in Honduras years ago. And my focus was what was called women in development. I was a WID volunteer, so I only worked with women groups in like indigenous populations way back in 88 to 90. And so what that required me to do was actually listen, because when you go in, you know, when the U.S. goes into a place, we have all these ideas. I didn't know anything. I had to learn Spanish. I literally got off a bus in the middle of this Guaymitas Yoro, this little town that had no electricity and only got water at like between 3 and 5 in the morning. You know, you turn your spigot on, you'd fill up a pila, you fill up a tank. And I remember meeting this group, which was called the 23 de Abril, you know, the 23rd of April. You name the group after the day you founded it, right? And they were pig farmers, so they had a chanchera, and these NGOs came in and they built this huge concrete pig pen it had these underground chambers where you would push all of the pig slop so that you could make methane, right? And then you could do all this stuff. That lasted about a year. And the women in the community said, here's what we really need. That wasn't what we needed. Here's what we need. We need to grow crops better. We need to have different types of feed. We need to have access to markets. And we're like, oh, but that's not what we thought you needed. So one of the things that we had to do, that I had to listen, really learn, was how do I actually listen to the needs and put myself and not lead with me, because my job there wasn't for me to do things. It was, how can we help individuals realize what they want to realize in the world that they live in? And I brought that back from the Peace Corps with a significant level of humility, to think that I don't think we always listen to what others need. And you, as a consultant going in to do this work, you have to listen. But you listen at multiple levels, Chris. What are they saying? What do they want? what do they need, and what are they willing to do? You listen, and then you ask that question. And so when you say you can ask some of those difficult questions, you
Yes.
do.
Yes.
And they are compelled to answer in ways that they aren't always compelled to answer internally with employees.
Well, because, as you were talking, I'm like, yeah, the real dilemma we have is in quote unquote traditional leadership,
Yeah.
or whatever we want to call what happened before in the world we've all been very successful in.
Mm-hmm.
Patience was not rewarded.
Right.
Even look, I'm so geeky that after we spoke and I told you I was so compelled by the patience thing, I'm like, I bet I can look at 3 competency models, the most common competency models out there for leadership, and patience is not on there. Or it's not a singled out, but you know what is? Action orientation.
Yeah.
Pace, really meaning
Mhm.
speed.
Right.
All these other things that they're not, by the way, everybody, I'm not saying those other things aren't valuable. I am saying, though, that what Russell's onto here is critically important, because we need to dial up the patience factor
Yeah.
for all reasons in leadership right now and forward. Like, I don't think we get, like, this isn't a luxury item anymore.
Right.
I feel like this is like a critical item. We need to define it appropriately. We need to teach it. Boy, that's a question mark. Like, how do you do that?
Yeah.
But what you're saying is so important, because I think about everything that's happened. For everybody watching and listening, whenever you're watching and listening to this, we are recording this in, I can't believe it's 2022, but
Yeah, it's amazing.
March 31st, 2022. And we've just been through, over 2 years of pandemic, but also we had Black Lives Matter. We've had a long tail Me Too. We just have a lot of dynamics that are now in the workplace forever.
Right.
And so I just am, when I say I'm compelled by it, I don't have another word, but for everyone, I think, Russell, this is critical. Like, and I would say to anyone listening and watching us, if this doesn't compel you to think about your own patience level, I don't know what will, because it made me even think, like, do I even coach people to be patient? I don't know that I do. I think I coach people to listen, maybe by scenario. I don't know a way to say it, Russell, but it's so important. And I'm going, wait a minute, what have we been doing? We've been rewarding fast. We've been rewarding impatience.
Yeah, I would have to say that I think you should give yourself a lot more credit than that, because you, when you are working with people, you are literally taking time to help them progress to a point, right? So I think the idea of patience is inherent in your work. The other and Christy, one of the things that you said that I've always appreciated is your role isn't to stay with the organization forever. You want to give them kind of tools and understanding so that they can kind of thrive on their own, right? And I think you, even though you may not think about it and use that word, I think you have a mindset around patience, and I want to give you my idea around it, and I'm just looking at it now in the book. So patience requires self-control and executive function. Managing our impatience, demonstrating self-control, and mastering our cognitive and behavioral responses are necessary components of patience. Cultivating patience allows for the development of perspective, knowledge, and ultimately wisdom. And I think that is where I think folks who have a significant level of patience also have wisdom, because wisdom is an issue connected with knowledge, practice, information, And then the individual is able to translate that over time to most situations that they go through. And they don't have a one size fits all mentality. They literally understand that as they sit and think and grow and ponder and study, that they learn, they develop skills around this idea of patience that they can put into practice in the real world. So, I talk about it. Patience is one of the most important skills a person can develop and is essential to effective leadership. Patience is not inaction. And I think sometimes there's confusion about that. Like folks say, how come we haven't gotten it done yet? It's an opportunity to develop fortitude, courage in and through adversity, determination, commitment to one's purpose, resilience, elasticity, recovery, and healing, perseverance, persistence to the end, mental toughness, the ability to remain resolute and positive through adversity and challenge, self-control, the will to act appropriately, and inner peace, which is life-sustaining calm. So when I think about the broader definition of leadership and patience, there is not one piece of the word which means I'm not doing anything. And I think that may be the piece that we may just need to remind folks of. So right now our company is developing some new software and we're having some really significant hiccups. The patience is different in that because the business need for that software to work is the foundation of the company. So we're not very patient in terms of, hey, how many people do we need to throw at this problem so that we can fix it? Because it's impacting our company and it's impacting our clients. But how the CTO is thinking about this is, what is it? How do we get in this situation in the first place? Yeah. What do we need to do different going forward? How do we think through the needs? How do we grow? How do we develop teams? That is part of patience. Because you have to be able to think, even in times of crisis, in ways that allow you to have clarity and mental toughness and inner peace and resilience and determination and perseverance and fortitude. Those are all pieces of this idea of patience that I have. So I just think it's, I think definitions are important because sometimes we use the same words, but we have different meanings around it, right? And so I think you've been very effective in providing clarity when you talk about execution, or when you talk about success, or when you talk about motivations, and you spell that out for your clients so that they're like, oh, that's what that looks like, right? Which I think is a great, I think it is very necessary, and it's a great skill.
Thank you. Look, you just said something I was writing while you were talking, just so I didn't lose it. So much gold. Cultivating. So that is an important word for everybody to consider, right? Because cultivating, it takes time, right? Like you are purposefully choosing steps in pursuit of something, right? I am cultivating it. And the reason I think that's so beautiful is because what is common for both of us, I think, is that we work with leaders, and most leaders, outside of all of these processes that we've talked about, like the software, et cetera, change management, et cetera, things that are programmatic, probably the more common ways you and I would be interacting with a CEO, for instance, is usually about their people, right? And like you said, the team and the people. Right. We're having people conversations, and more than likely, most of those conversations are around Delta, right? Like something needs to change, something needs to change. That's what I mean, everybody, by the Greek symbol of Delta is used to talk about change. And so as you were writing, I was just like, yeah, I feel like the majority of time where this patience thing needs to sit first and foremost is in a leader's understanding, and for everybody watching and listening, that this is you, right? You, whether you're a first-time manager, supervisor, or whether you've been doing it for 30 years, doesn't matter. You got people. And for people to make any sort of change, whether it's a small incremental change, or if you're asking them to make a leap, right, in competency and skill, this is where, to me, like the patience thing is super important. And again, we don't often say that word enough. And, you know, I would say recently, even, Russell, I've been in some situations, you know, where people were put on a PIP. That's a performance improvement plan. For someone who's never heard of that, that means something has happened or a series of things have happened, and we're to a point where the org says, hey, buddy, woman, who, whatever it is, these things have to change, or else you might not be able to stay with us anymore.
Right.
And what's fascinating to me as you were talking, because I wrote down a little note about a current situation, and I'm thinking, talk about a moment where there's no passion, no patience.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And the expectation is the person's going to learn new things, behave in sustainably new and different ways. And, you know, you get to that point in the situation, then, you know, patience isn't even most likely even going to be entertained.
Right.
And yet it's when we need it the most.
Right. Right. Chris, there is this idea that if you give folks information, they'll know what to do with it. And it's not always true. And I watched this I would listen to these coaches, literally coaches on all my kids. I have 3 adult children now, and they all played sports. And one of the things that I would hear coaches yell at it is like that, you know, just do it. And I'm like, this is the first time they've played football, soccer, right? How should they even be angling their foot to kick the ball that way? And so they're running around and they're yelling. I'm like, no, demonstrate. What is it? Explain, demonstrate, and explain what it is that would allow them to do the technique that you're asking them to do. You know, spend time doing that. And so what's happened in many of the places that I've worked is, and it just happened recently, and it was, the individual said this kind of as a joke, and I said, look, I take this very seriously. You're gonna have to clean house. And I'm like, no, that's not the job that I want to be engaged in. Let's back up a minute and ask the why question. Why would you even say that? And the answer is typically the same. Well, because the people aren't doing what we want them to do. And I said, so is that performance? Is that execution of tasks? What is that? And they're like, well, and I said, explain it. And almost always the issue is that they did not provide clarity into what the expectations were. And I'm like, why don't you tell them? So, case in point, somebody sent me an email and it said, look at this, we've gone through 6 emails and the person hasn't done what I want them to do. And I said, I'm looking at all 6 emails. Nowhere in this email did you tell them what you wanted them to do. You said, is it done? That was your statement. And they said, well, we have a question about this. And your response was, and? I'm like, wait a minute. How about you stop, just say, hey, here's what we need, and here's what I need you to do. And I said this to this person, and he said, he sent that email, and the immediate response was, thank you. That's exactly what I needed to hear. Just tell me what you want me to do, so that I don't have to spin my wheels trying to figure out how I need to ask you a question to get the answer that we both want to get to. So, you know, and so somebody said, well, yeah, but you're a communication expert. And I said, no, I said, I want to use a different word for you. Effective communication is different than just communicate. We communicate all the time. You know, I wear my blue shirt. You might think, well, what's going through his mind? And he looks like he works at Best Buy. You know, folks say things like, we all have ideas about others because it simplifies things. I have you in a box, in a category based on whatever, height, weight, how you look, race, gender, all these things. I simplify you by putting you in a box. And then what you have to prove to me in some ways is, are you an exception to the rule that I created for you, right? Which is really problematic.
Yeah.
But what I say is communication isn't just sharing information. It's sharing information in a way that you intended to be shared, and having it heard or understood in the way that you intended it to be understood. So I said, just provide clarity. Be upfront and direct and specific. And then you should lay out your expectations in a way that somebody can say, I can do that, or I can't. I can meet your expectation, or I can't meet your expectation. Or here's what I'm going to need to meet that expectation. I need these resources. And so I'm like, and none of that is basic, because folks have these ideas in their mind about what it means to be a professional, or what it means to be X, or what it means to be Y. And you've probably heard this often as well. Well, they should know that.
Like,
and I'm like, how should they know that?
This should be a T-shirt that we burn.
Yes, it should be. It should be. It should be. Well, they should know that. They've worked with me long enough.
Yes.
And I'm like, wow, how about if you just, so I laugh. There's an exercise that I do with every new team that I'm with. The communication exercise. And I say, how do you communicate with others? How do you want others to communicate with you? What are your hot buttons, right? And then typically if it's a group, I say, hey, how are we going to communicate as a team? Because what you might need individually may not be what works for us as a team.
Yeah.
Chris, what do you think is the hardest question for folks to answer?
Definitely not the hot button one.
Oh, it's always a hot button one.
Really?
Yeah. And do you know why?
No, why? They're not willing?
Right. Because if I tell you things that bother me, you're going to use that against me. You're going to do those things to me.
Wow.
Right. And I say, as part of this exercise, that would be a violation of trust. So I can tell you how I communicate. I can typically be, so let's say this, for an example, somebody says, I kind of talk around the issue, or I can sometimes be long-winded. How do you want folks to communicate with you? I want folks to be really direct, specific, and give me all the details. Or I just want you to tell me what you need. And if I have a request for details, I'll ask you that, right? And then hot buttons, and folks pause and they're like, I said, well, you know what they are. And so I get folks to say, I hate certain types of jokes in the workplace. I hate know-it-alls. And they list this whole list of things. And one of the reasons when I talk to folks about this is why it's so difficult is because somebody on their team is demonstrating those behaviors, a supervisor or a colleague, and they don't want to kind of out them. And I say, it's really important that folks know those triggers for you that are going to impact your ability to be successful in that job. And why wouldn't you want to tell somebody, hey, if you talk to me this way, it's really going to push my butt. I'm not going to be able to do the work. And I say that for me, that's gold. And I say, okay, because that's kind of laying out these expectations. And then now I really have a choice, and others have a choice. You can say, I'm always going to make off-color jokes. That's just who I am. And if you don't like it, this isn't the place for you to work. And I'm like, what? And now you have clarity, because before you thought, well, maybe they just didn't know. Maybe they just didn't know that that was offensive or bothered me. But now that I've said it and they continue, now they're aware and they're making a conscious choice. I say, share that information. Share that information so that then you are able to make better decisions about the relationships that you have with people. And remind folks, hey, remember when we had that? And so when I do it, I put a little booklet together for all the participants. Say, hey, here's what Chris, here's how she communicates. Everybody gets it. Brilliant. And I say, and then you know what? Now you have a choice if you're going to give folks the benefit of the doubt and say, hey, you know what? Before today, you didn't know that bothered me. Now, what we also have is permission to say, hey, remember the conversation we had on March 31st, where I said, here's the things that impact me. It can undermine my ability to trust you or to try to work better. Well, here's how you're demonstrating that. Oh, and they go, oh, I didn't even know. Thank you for bringing it to my attention. Or stop being such a whiner. You have these options. You go, okay, so I brought it to your attention. So that's what I think about when I talk about clarity and kind of effective communication. My desire now, you can probably see the gray hairs in the video, is I want to try to simplify so many of the relationships that I have in the workplace so that we can work together better and successfully. And I think you said something before about permission, giving folks permission. I want folks to have, I want people to bring their full selves to work. I want them to bring their appropriate selves to work, and I want them to share with me what they need, not just want, but need, so that they can be successful in the workplace. I need to be treated with respect and dignity. What does that mean for you? Okay. I need, because folks need to make money. But what are those other things that are going to be, that are real for you, so that when you come to work, you say that I feel valued, and they demonstrate caring, and they do it in a consistent way.
I want to rip off this, and then I think we're at time. I can't believe it. I literally just glanced at, I'm like, wait, what? For everybody listening and watching, what Russell just outlined for you is an amazing, let's call it a tool, let's call it a practice. I used to call that creating a decoder for other people. And I want to add something that you were implying, I believe, but I want to say it to people, like, if you can accelerate through that old model of forming, storming, norming, performing, right? So, everybody, you can find that on our website at ariacoach.com. If you don't know forming, norming, storming, performing, it's been around since the 1960s, still relevant, right? When we need to work together with people, we're going to go through a period of time and either organically decide, like you said, trying to figure out people and how we're going to interact and how we're not going to interact and how all that feels, or we can accelerate that process with healthy norming, doing what Russell outlined, right? Like, oh, wow, actually facilitating a conversation with some structure where we are transparent with each other about our preferences, about things that work for us and don't. It's brilliant, and it sounds simple, but of course, it's probably more impactful than anybody can understand. So as you were talking, I'm like, oh my gosh, I got to punctuate this moment. Like, I want everybody to learn. So you just got a tool, and you don't have to be an executive, right? I love what you said, because you could do it just yourself. And we actually have a client company, a tech company, very cool, but also the leaders, like Suki and the leaders, I think, that you talked about, have created an organization that they wished they had worked in before. One of the things they did, I don't think it's SharePoint, but whatever their internal intranet is, each executive has a page called Working with Me.
That's great.
There, isn't that cool?
Yeah.
Where they have like a whole, everybody, they decorate it any way they want. They can have a picture of your dog, but also, like Russell said, they have an outline of standard things in there that everybody answered the questions. And it had a lot to do with working. What does it look like when I'm mad? What does it look like when I'm frustrated? What are you going to hear? What words am I going to use when I'm not getting what I need?
Right.
And simple, but powerful. And no surprises.
Right.
You don't have
That's
to
brilliant.
It's great. It's I didn't make it up. They did it, and they do a lot of very cool things there. And it makes me hopeful, to your point earlier, about the workplace, because I'm like, oh, look at that. Look what happens when leaders are authentic and transparent. And not everybody likes what they're hearing, to your point. It's not perfect. We can talk about that another day, because someone on that team does not like sports analogies, and we've got a whole bunch of other people who, guess what, they played sports. So that's for another day. This went by too fast, so I feel like we need a part 2 or something.
Sure, I'd love to do it. I think what you're doing is fantastic, and I just want to say I'm appreciative of that. I would be remiss if I didn't share the other founders of this company. So Stephen Chow, Charlie Steiner, and Suki Pavla created this company, and They are very unique individuals who have their own styles. I am going to absolutely suggest that they create an About Me page because they are very different people. So that would be great.
And how inspirational for all the employees from here and forever to know, like, when this was birthed a long time ago in their brains, you know, someday I'm going to have a company, ...
Right. And look at us, and look at us now, right? And we're going to bring the people who we want in. It's a great idea. So
including you, by the way, they brought you.
Yeah, I'm very happy. I'm very happy. I like I said, I've known them for a long time. Suki and I are actually the screenwriting partners. You know, we've done stuff together, and so I remember all of his some days, and now they're coming to fruition. So it's really nice.
Yeah, that's amazing. Okay, well, I guess for now, I don't want to say goodbye. I'm just going to say until the next time. Kind of like those old Batman episodes.
Yeah, I wish I could make that little swirly
Same bat station, same bat channel. I want to thank you, Russell. But we will be back, everybody, guaranteed. I will make that happen. And everybody listening and watching, I invite you to go to ariacoach.com if you haven't done that. We collect your email, not to send you stuff, but so you can have a whole bunch of free things. So behind the portal, there's a whole world in there, and it's yours. So please, if you haven't done that, be my guest and look for more. And then I podcast and other exciting things coming in our Lead Now program. And of course, go buy Russell's book, The Leadership Papers, and his new book when it comes out, if they let him keep that long title or not. We will find out in the next episode.
Excellent. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Bye-bye, everybody.